Our style is just something that's kind of ingrained within us. It's our personality. A photographer that already has what you're looking for is going to be the person that you want to go with.
Hi, welcome to Say Yes to the Best, where we talk to the best wedding pros that give you wedding planning tips. I'm John from PGP Wedding Films. Thanks for checking us out. We have lots of content up on Instagram and YouTube all the time. So follow us on Instagram, subscribe on YouTube, and there's a little bell on YouTube to hit to get notified every time we post a new video. Our main goal is just make your wedding planning a little bit easier. Today I have Danielle Salerno of Danielle Salerno Photography with me. How you doing, Danielle?
I'm great. Hi, John. How are you?
What you wanted to talk to our couples about is how to choose a wedding photographer based on what you see in their portfolio, especially if they're on Instagram. I'm sure they're seeing tons of different types of photos that all look beautiful, and how to navigate what fits for their wedding can probably be overwhelming at times. So what would you suggest to kind of help them narrow down what is right for their wedding?
Yes, as wedding vendors, we tend to forget that couples are all new to this, and especially as visual artists, photographers, and videographers, we know what we're looking at when we look at styles, editing, types of shooting, and we sometimes forget that couples don't really think about photography until they're looking for their wedding photographer. And they often don't think about videography until they're looking for their wedding videographer. So I'm really excited to talk about how couples can look at portfolios and start getting an idea of what's their style and what photographer they're going to want based on what they like from all the portfolios and all the work that they see all over the place. So when couples are starting to gather materials and look at photographers, they're going to run into some distinct editing styles that we're seeing today. So in 2019, 2020, I would say that there are about 4 pretty distinct editing styles that our couples will see. The first one we like to call moody or dark. And these are images that typically have warm tones. The shadows or the blacks in the images are dark. Sometimes there's a little grain, so the images look like film. And a lot of people who like really emotion-filled, maybe even somber type images really gravitate towards moody and dark. And I find that they have a very romantic feeling in all the images. So if you are having maybe a winter wedding, or you just feel that you as a couple are very well represented by a romantic, almost like gritty, kind of filmy style, dark and moody might interest you. Another one is light and airy, which some people would say is almost the opposite of dark and moody. So these are images that are very bright, of course. Usually they're images where the sun is behind the couple, so the background is almost white. A lot of pictures that are taken outside, you'll notice that the greens aren't super, super bright. They're a little bit what we call desaturated. So the focus is actually more on the couple in these images rather than everything that's going on around you. That type of editing style is used a lot in editorials. So a lot of photographers who favor the light and airy style will call themselves fine art photographers. Sometimes they're also shooting on film and they're matching that kind of film aesthetic. Whereas on the dark and moody end, you're getting a lot of green. On the light and airy end, you're getting a lot of what we call blown out images, which is essentially a lot of white. So for example, on a sunny day, maybe you'll look up in the sky and you'll see blue sky, but the way a light and airy photographer shoots, you're gonna notice just a lot of brightness in the kind of like area around the couple. Another style, which is the style that I prefer to shoot in, I like to call classic and vibrant. So this is an editing style where the photographer is trying to get as close as possible to the natural eye. They're thinking, what did everything look like on the day of the wedding? I'm going to edit in that way. So when the couple looks back, they'll see the exact colors, the exact feelings, the exact type of weather and emotions and everything that was happening in that moment. So when you are kind of a classic or vibrant editor, your weddings might look a little bit different. For example, if I'm photographing a snowy winter wedding, I'm going to edit it slightly different than when I'm photographing a June wedding and the sky is blue on a golf course with a million flowers. Because that kind of editing style is just making sure to stay really true to what the wedding looked like and what the couple wanted. You make a lot of choices when you're choosing colors and themes and details for your wedding. And the classic or vibrant photographer is going to make sure that those colors really pop and everything looks the way it did on your wedding day. And finally, you have what I like to classify as the creative photographer or the creative editing style. And this is someone who looks at light and elements in the room a little bit differently than everyone else. They look at it with this artful eye and they look at everything with this possibility. So rather than take what's around you and photograph it just as is, they're playing with light, they're playing with the tools that they have in their photographer's tool belt, and they can take a moment that you could look at behind the scenes and think, how could it ever look like that, and turn it into something else. A lot of times they're using creative use of angles, so walls aren't straight and they could be shooting from above or below. Anything to get kind of like a creative perspective on the moment, something that's going to tell the story, but in a way that you never thought before. So a creative editing style is usually kind of dramatic. You're looking at really bright brights, really dark dark. Even in a room like this with great lighting, they might manipulate the light. They might move the bride and put her in the sunlight so that it's only really bright on her face and this really great dark fall off behind her. The creative style is often pretty dramatic, so you're going to know right away if you love it or not.
Obviously, there are so many different types of styles. What exactly does that mean for a couple on their wedding day? Like, what should they expect stylistically from each different type of photographer?
So each type of photographer is going to handle your portraits a little differently. Even though what I talked about was how they're editing your photos, they're also going to approach how they're shooting the day a little bit differently. So there are two basic types of ways that your photographer is going to handle your photos during the day. One is photojournalistic, which is a hands-off approach, fly-on-the-wall approach. They're just standing back and capturing what's happening. And the other one is posed, where they're doing some directing and explaining what you need to be doing in order to get the vision that they have for your photos. And a lot of photographers on a wedding day are doing a mix of photojournalistic and posed. And a lot of people on a wedding day want a mix of photojournalistic and posed. A lot of times the photojournalistic photos are going to be where you're getting your emotions, and the posed photos are going to be where you're getting your frame-worthy photos, your group photos, those photos that grandma loves where you're just smiling real big. You can talk to your photographer and ask them what type of mix they like to do. There are a few photographers who prefer to shoot a wedding 100% photojournalistic, and that's amazing if that's what you want. A lot of times people like posed photos, so that's when you would enjoy a photographer who does a mix of photojournalistic and posed. And finally, there are photographers who actually prefer to do mostly post photos throughout your wedding day. They have a very specific style and a very specific idea of how they want all their images to look. And they feel that those photojournalistic moments just aren't fitting into what their vision is for your day. When you're looking at a photographer's portfolio, you may be able to tell what percentage of what they shoot during a wedding day is photojournalistic versus posed, but it's always great if you can ask them and see how comfortable they are with doing the percentage that you're thinking of and how they arrived at certain images, especially if they're images that you love. You want to know if it was photojournalistic or posed and if they're willing to do that for you.
Those are really, really helpful. You know, one thing that I always realize, especially with people who reach out to me, is, you know, like one videographer is going to call a 5-minute film a highlight film, but somebody else might call it a short film, and then someone calls a feature film 15 minutes, but somebody else means that's like an hour-long documentary. So it can be really confusing, and I'm sure it's the same way with photos. So I think this will really, really help people kind of narrow down what they like and what they want their photographer to be doing on their wedding day.
There's so many technical terms that a lot of times us as visual artists, we forget that everyone doesn't just have off the top of their head or understand what that means. And I do have one more, which is the way that a photographer approaches your images just within the day. So we talked about photojournalistic versus posed, but this one's a little different. It has to do with when you're looking at the images, what the overall effect is. And I kind of call it natural versus designed or cinematic. So a lot of photographers, like we mentioned with the photojournalistic and pose, will do a mix. They'll do some natural portraits where they're letting you be yourself. They're giving you prompts that are bringing your emotions out. And sometimes during sunset or night, they're going to pull out the big guns and get you those really cool cinematic shots. You typically are going to want a photographer whose portfolio already has that ratio of natural to cinematic images. Because although we as photographers like to be flexible, our style is just something that's kind of ingrained within us. It's our personality. So a photographer that already has what you're looking for is going to be the person that you want to go with.
Absolutely. I had one couple come to me years ago, and they sent me somebody else's video and said, "Can you do that?" And I was newer, so I was like, "Yeah, sure, I can." But it's like, it was very much like kind of fighting myself, trying to make the film something that I wouldn't normally make. And they were happy, and that's always, you know, the number one goal. But it definitely was a learning experience for me. It's like, I can't try to be somebody else. I see a wedding day through my own lens. And that's kind of the, you know, if you don't like the work on my portfolio, you know, that's kind of where, you know, a clue to you that I'm not the right fit. So I think these can really help people really narrow down who is a fit for them.
Absolutely. We as visual artists like to be flexible. We are wedding vendors, and that's kind of our thing, to be flexible. But the truth is that your style is kind of part of who you are, and it is like fighting yourself when you tell someone you're going to go against your natural proclivities as an artist.
I absolutely agree. Danielle, thank you so much for all these tips. Like I said, I think people are going to really be able to help understand what they're looking for in their photographer and finding the right people.
You're so welcome, John. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching Say Yes to the Best. We're going to have a lot of episodes out